Greetings comrades, Thesovietgaming here. Today we will talk about Tap Wizard 2 and we'll talk about the builds in Era 1. This is the time when you start the game and for the next 3 to 5 weeks or so. Then you will reach Era 2 and there will be different skills available for you. So right guys, I decided to structure video a little bit differently than I first wanted to make it, so it will be a little bit havoc. First of all, we will discuss the classes and what kind of spells will work on them. It will be like the short intro for the people who don't want to watch the whole video, and after that we'll kinda go over each spell and how it can be used for every class. So if you want a short notice on how to use every character, it will go first, then you can watch the part where we discuss all the spells. I'm dead, so sad. Anyway, so for Ember Freeze Prophet, I would go for either Shard Bolter or Falling Skies out of the Frost spells and Firestorm and Fury Deluge from the fire spells. That's my favorite setup for this character. It works pretty well. It doesn't have any serious issues, maybe if you get unlucky with the perks, but other than that, it's pretty powerful. Now for Electrovile Maestro. I think Static Arc is a good starting point for lightning spells, and it will depend if you want to have more spells of the same school or you want them balanced. If you want a lot of lightning spells, that will be a really good option. So maybe Ionic Charger and 2 Static Arcs might be a good option. Quite a lot of stuff happening on the battlefield. Then I would definitely skip out Voltaic Swords for early awakenings, because that won't be really good. You won't be able to perk it up that much. And of course Ionic Charger is a must because it will speed up the Cloud. Out of the poison spells, I would go for the Toxic Spray. I would go for the Toxic Bolt instead, and the Cloud. So my personal build will be Static Arc, Ionic Charger, Toxic Bolt, and Toxic Cloud. And yeah, Toxic Cloud will be poisoning, and this one will be shocking the enemies up. For Ionic Charger, never go for the status effect, go for the status affinity when it will speed up the spells. Next one is Chill Bloom Warlock. This is Frost and Poison. Over here, I played it a few times, and honestly, I went for Cloud, Toxic Bolt, Falling Skies, and Shard Bolter, I think. That was pretty effective. A lot of freeze and poisoning on the enemies. Early on it was not that effective, so for the first maybe 5 to 7 levels until I got the right perks. After that it ramped up and was pretty good, so why the hell not? So yeah, pretty good options for this character. Other build might include Winter Coil instead of Falling Skies if you don't want enemies to get close to you, and you might add in Toxic Spray instead of Toxic Bolt for even more close range damage, but I think that going with what I described to you will be good enough. Firelight Maven, my favorite build before you unlock the Elemental Master. Over here, I will skip Firestream. It's not that bad spell. It can do a lot of havoc on the enemy, and you can use it for, you know, boosting the amount of fire spells in order for a higher reach of lightning spells. But I don't use it that much. I would go for the Fury Deluge, of course. This is a must for any fire build. This is like a really good spell. And Firestorm, and out of the lightning, I would get Ionic Charger. So it will be 2 Ionic Chargers and Fire Deluge and Firestorm. That's how I would roll. And if I want something different, I would include a Static Arc instead of second Ionic Charger. So that would be a good option. Most of those skills will do well and will work really well. Now let's move on to the Elemental Master. This one is really interesting because this guy doesn't have all the available spells. It have only 2 spells per school, so it doesn't have the Cloud, for example, which we need. It doesn't have the Swords that we don't need. It doesn't have the, what do we have from the Frost? The Spikes, which are really cool as well, but it have the main spells that I usually use. So we have the Fury Deluge, we have the Firestorm, we have the Ionic Charger, and that's enough for me. And the good thing about this guy, that each level up of the staff level, he will do more damage. So instead of, I think, 5%, it will give 7% bonus increase, and that damage will ramp up quite a lot. So this is my favorite character to play right now in Era 1, and you should, well, you can go with anything. I managed to beat it with any of those characters late game for like level 18, 19, whatever. This one is just more fun for me personally. you can experiment with the different setups for this one. The problem for this character will be getting the right perks, because you will be getting the random perk, and that can go for the spell that you don't need. So for example, if we're going with the fire lightning build and for example one toxic bolt, because we can get double spells, so we can get Ionic Charger 2 times in the spellbook, we might get some Falling Skies, some Shard Bolter and Toxic Spray, which we totally don't need. So sometimes I got 3 spells that I don't use at all, and I had some of the perks that were useless. But it's still pretty fun to play. You have a lot of variety, you can build different setups. It's not limited to what I just said, you can use anything here, and that's really cool, so I would advise going for something like that. Alright, so now after discussing all the classes, we can go and go over each spell to see how good it is and how you can use it in your builds. And don't forget that all those spells are available on the website, the link is down there. So I've been experimenting with the different builds. Right now I'm running this Electrovile Maestro guy with the lightning and poison damage. First of all, I would like to tell you that it's not really important which class do you pick. Some are more effective, some are less, but it's to your own preference, and any of the classes can do well. It will just take a little bit more for you to go to the next awakening. So since we are at this character, let's discuss the spells that are available here. The problem with the builds in this game, the main problem, that they heavily rely on the perks you will get, and you won't be able to get guaranteed perks because they are all random, and like if your build is based on the elemental effect, you might not get it for a long time and your build won't work. Or for example, if you're looking for status affinity for that lightning perk that will speed up the spell, it won't be available for you if you are unlucky for a while, and this is like the main thing for most of my builds. So yeah, you can experiment with different things and you will find something that will work for you more or less. If you're totally unhappy with what you have, if you want to reset your build, you can always go to your menu and use this feather duster. You will abandon this character and start from the fresh start, and yeah, you can experiment with different skill setups if you totally screwed up, but I don't think it's possible. So alright, for our lightning guy, I used this spell, the static arc, because it's pretty fast. So my idea was using the perks that allow poison spells when they are cast after different school to be bigger for the clouds. So this spell is supposed to be an opener that will speed. It's pretty fast, it's the fastest lightning spell available for us, and it will shock enemies as well, that will lower their skill speed, and moreover will give them a status effect. So we use this one like that. Then of course we had the poison toxic bolt. I was picking between the toxic spray and toxic bolt. Both of those are pretty good, but the problem is I didn't get that many perks. Like I didn't get options to get the perk for the toxic spray, so I went for the bolt, and it ended up like this. So you can see all those benefits right here, and it's like a penetration round basically. It shoots right into the enemy and it splinters after that and hitting the enemies behind it. I'm not sure that it have the poison. I think we don't have the poison for it. Yeah, this one doesn't have the poison, but it's a good damage spell for us, and the cooldown is pretty low as well. So now we have the static arc with the cooldown of 0.24 and the toxic bolt with 0.39. So they kinda been used up very often. Then we have the Ionic Charger, which I use in most of my builds because I like that effect when it accelerates the spell on the right. And it's important to get this perk. So don't go for the shock effect for Ionic Charger. That's a bad idea because you won't be able to get this important and powerful perk for it. Everything else here is for the cast speed, so this is not a damaging spell for me. This is a spell that kinda speeds up the toxic clouds, which does main damage for me. So yeah, the next one is Toxic Cloud. Basically this is the variation of the AoE spell that I use to destroy most of the enemies. This kind of build, you can use different spells from different schools as well, but this kind of build will work for most of your playthroughs. So you can use it when you have a lot of enemies. It won't work only in case if you are doing... Where are those things? There we go. If you will use the Fate of Elite Forces, because you will encounter less enemies and they will be more powerful. In that scenario, you might want to go for the build that have more single target abilities. There won't be that many enemies, you don't need that much of AoE, and it will work way better with this, which one? The Horde. The Horde, where you have more enemies. 50% more enemies, AoE will shine, yes. As for other spells of those schools, we'll discuss all of them. If you don't know, by the way, you can click on the codec and click on the Ancient Tome, and here you will see the upgrades available for each spell, and you can build your character with those in mind and hoping that you will get the right perks for them. So you can get all of those: Status Affinity, Elemental Overload, and Cascade for this spell, and so on. So basically you can see which spell can do that. So right, for the static art, instead of shocking the enemies, we could get the Status Affinity. When hitting an enemy release with the status effect, it will release a spark that deals 25% damage for each status effect on the enemy. So it's not that powerful in my opinion, and getting the status effect from this spell is better. So both of those, Slayer and Elemental Overload, will be available for you, and other than that, you will be able to get Magic Tempering, I think, or the spellcasting. Basically, it will be either higher damage, lower speed cast, or higher speed cast without the bonus damage. So yeah, those are the options you have for each of those spells. So for the static art, I would recommend getting the Lightning Shocking skill. For the Voltaic Swords, I don't like that spell that much because it's pretty weak, specifically at the early stages. When you just start out, the swords don't do that much damage, and the best thing about that is this Electrocute skill. It can take out enemies when they are injured, but you need to level it up to level 10. So at level 1 it has 5% remaining health, and the higher the level is, the higher will be remaining health required to take out the enemies, which can be really effective with any other AoE spell. So those swords will take out one-shot enemies. It will be really efficient for the late stages, like waves 100, 200 plus or so, but early on the Era 1 I think it won't work that well, because you know, you need to get a lot of luck, a lot of perks in order for that to be efficient, and you won't be able to get it early on. So yeah. As for the patience, if you go in that route of Electrocute, it doesn't require that much, and Swordsmith is a good one because you will get extra swords, more AoE damage. Now my favorite, Ionic Charger, Status Affinity is a must because it will speed up the spell on the right, and then over here you have the Patience that will kinda increase the damage. It's not that bad, but once again I don't use the Ionic Charger for the damage, and Elemental Overload is pretty good because it will increase the range of the spell, and it will last longer, so it will hit more targets, and that will allow you to get more of that speed up. Now let's talk about the poison spells, since we are with the poison character, and the next one will be Fire and Ice. Toxic Spray for the beginning. Toxic Spray, I don't like the spell that much. I tried it. It shoots with a like wide area of projectiles, but the problem is it's pretty much a close range spell, and it's an AoE spell as well. So in order for it to be effective, you either have to be really close to the enemies, which you want to avoid, or you want to shoot it for like AoE damage. And for that we have clouds, which are more effective. So I don't like it that much, but yeah, Status Affinity might be not the best option again, because for this one I think Poisoning might be the better option if you don't go for the clouds. But other than that, it's a good thing. Like if you're going for it and using this ricochet ability, it's pretty good, because it will kind of go through the enemies again, and it will do more havoc and damage for the enemy crowd. Venom Cycling will give you additional projectiles on the next cast per kill, so if it's a strong spell for using it for the damage, that might be a really good option, because that will allow you to shoot not like what do we have at the start. So it won't be not 9 projectiles, but way more after that, specifically if that will be leveled up properly. So if you can shoot like 20 projectiles at a time, that will be pretty good damage, specifically with the Status Affinity over here, so they will kind of ricochet through, so that can be quite dangerous. But then again, in order for it to be that effective, you need to build it up quite a lot, which is not available early on. And the last one is Toxic Splatter. Once again, it can be a beneficial additional perk if you have it, but it doesn't do that much damage, but it will add some AoE capabilities, because it will release a small toxic droplet, which is why the hell not? It will be a good additional damage. Now my favorite poison spell is Toxic Cloud, because those clouds are fantastic. Look at them, they look fun, they do a lot of stuff. Slayer, when the spell kills an enemy, suck in enemies with a strength of 200%. I have it, although if we'll take a look over here, we don't really see it working that well. So the enemies are being killed, but I don't see them being sucked in that much. Maybe that's because it's not upgraded that much, so it's not sucking them in that much. As you can see, the enemies are still following me, even though they are dying, so probably not the best thing to have, specifically if you are just early on and you don't have enough of perks available for you. The second one is Elemental Overload. When the spell casts after a spell of a different school, 25% bigger clouds. This is really good because the clouds actually increase in size quite a lot and they cover more area and they're doing more AoE damage, so that's really nice. And Ruination, more damage to enemies without elemental status effect. I think this one, my personal opinion, is useless because most, like, let's say most, 9 out of 10 builds will rely on status effects. And that one will be useless. So I have poison on this one. I didn't went for elemental effect. We don't even have it here. We don't have elemental effect. So this one is poisoning enemies. And Ruination won't work. It won't do the damage. So probably don't go for it. And yeah, guys, by the way, you won't go to the end game with those spells right now, because right now I'm at Era 1 and I have 10 hours left to kindle at the current rate, so it's really close. It's almost here to tomorrow basically, and I still didn't get that far. So I have level 18 Staff of Knowledge. I skipped a few days, yes, maybe a week, so it might be level 20 or so for you, but still, even then, using spells like Sword over here, it won't work because you won't have enough of those perk levels in order for them to be effective. So anyway, guys, I hope that we are done with the lightning poison spells. You can combine them with the different spell schools as well, no problem. Let's do the awakening and go for ice and fire mage. All right, ice, Ember Freeze Prophet. So right, for Ember Freeze Prophet, there are different ways how you can do that. I usually rely on this spell, on the Fiery Deluge. I don't use Fire Stream that much because, in my opinion, it's not that efficient. Like it doesn't do that much damage. It have really good spell casting speed, but that's about it. I use Fireballs instead. And I usually have Lightning over here, but if we don't have the Lightning, we can use Winter's Coil for additional AoE and slowing the enemies down. Falling Skies is a really good spell as well, and Shard Bolter will be a good option too. We will use a Shard Bolter that will allow to keep enemies at bay. So basically, if we'll add some frost effect to the ice spells, the enemies won't be able to get that close to us, and that way we won't take extra damage. And Fireballs with the Fiery Deluge will be able to destroy them with their damage, so that will be a pretty good build. Honestly, for this spell, for this setup, you can use all kind of spells, because this one, Falling Skies, I was experimenting with it last build, the one before you saw, and it's pretty good as well. So you can replace this one with that one. That will add additional damage to the enemies outside of your area, but the enemies can get closer to you like that. But the damage output of this one, specifically with some perks, is really, really good. Alright, let's go over the spells. Fire Stream. When hitting an enemy with a status effect, status elemental effects on the enemy instantly deal 1 tick of damage equal to 0.25 and reduce their duration by the same time. I don't like this, because I like status effects not only because they do damage over time on the enemies, but because they do the debuffs on them, they are weaker, and because other spells can use elemental effects on the enemy, so I wouldn't go for that. So if you're using this first spell, I would recommend using Burn on it, so it will burn enemies and do the status effect on them instead of, you know, removing the duration of it. Elemental Purity, when the spell is cast after the spell of the same school, including itself 20% more projectile lifetime. It might be good, because its spell's cast speed is really low, so if you have several fire spells, like 3 out of 4 in your spell book, that will be good. my god, we die so often. So yeah, why the hell not? The last one, Afterburner. When the spell does not hit an enemy, gain a reserve charge. When an enemy is hit, lose 10% of the boost charge and all reserve charges, then gain boost charges equal to the reserve charges lost, 5% of my... Anyway, that kind of increases the cast speed of the spell. So this will work really well in conjunction with the elemental purity over here. So the spell will be cast one after another way faster, and then it will do more damage. So it's really good when you're like preparing for the next enemy or so. So yeah, it's a good thing if you use that spell. Firestorm is my favorite. I use it all the time when I go for the fire build. Status affinity: when hitting an enemy with the status effect, generate a Spiraling Fireball a short distance from the enemy that lasts for 0.7 seconds and deal 20% more damage. Again, I usually go for status effect instead of status affinity, because I don't use other spells than Fire Deluge and Fireballs, and Fire Deluge is usually being cast on the enemies on the back line of the enemy. So with a Fireball, with a status effect that will burn enemies in front of you, Fire Deluge will burn enemies in the back. So yeah, I would go for the status effect instead of this one. Slayer, ricochet of the enemy when kills an enemy. It might be good because that spell does quite a lot of damage. Elemental Overload, when the spell is cast after the spell of different school, 20% more projectiles. I don't think it's that important if you ask me, because it doesn't do that much of useful stuff. But it depends on the build. Usually I have at least 2 fire spells in my spell book, so I won't go for it, because usually to be cast after the spells of the same school. Now, my favorite spell so far out of all of those, Fire Deluge. Status affinity: when hitting an enemy with a status effect, 3% more velocity. This is pretty good as well, so both this one and status effect on this spell will be a good option for you. The problem is, status effect by itself will increase its damage by the burn amount, and that will actually have the burn on the enemy, so it's good as well. It's up to you to decide if you want to get an extra damage from this, or that those pillars will move a little bit faster and follow enemies better and find their targets better. I personally haven't decided on this one yet. I kinda like both options. So yeah, sometimes I go for one, sometimes I go for another. It doesn't matter that much, because in the end, in Era 1, you will still be able to overcome everything with any of those. So it's up to you to decide what do you want more. Next one, Slayer. When the spell kills an enemy, 2.5% more impact damage the next cast. 15 stacks maximum. This is really good, because it often kills enemies, because when it's just cast, it's doing insane amount of damage. So this is really good. And now Elemental Overload, which is good as well. When the spell casts after the spell of a different school, shoots a fireball in a random direction every 0.4 seconds that deals 140% damage. And it's being done so often, and it works most of the time, so it's a good thing to have. So basically, your main idea will be using most perks available on the Fire Deluge if you have them in the options, after you got the elemental effects of ice and fire on your main spells, basically. Now, Falling Skies. We are going into the frost area. Falling Skies isn't your main. I think I kind of moved them around. I don't know. It's not your main spell like those two. It's a really good high damage spell that can do quite a lot. You can either freeze the enemies by slowing their movement speed, or use the status affinity that will, for the next cast, one smaller balls of ice accompany the main one, dealing 20% damage. In my opinion, again, that doesn't worth it. I tried it. It looks pretty cool, like a lot of stuff falling from the skies. Really great looks, but as far as the effectiveness goes, it's not that fantastic. So yeah, I'd go for the freeze effect instead. Elemental Overload. When this spell casts after the spell of different school, apply Cripple. Crippled enemies have 30% less attack speed until they complete an attack. This is good, because at the later stages, that will allow you to avoid damage a bit more effective when you are crowded, and it's only one level, so it have its max effect after one perk. So I think it's a go-to if you have ability to get it, but priority should always be status effect. To slow, to burn, to shock enemies, and so on. The last one, Cascade. After every 80 enemies killed by the falling skies, 100% more projectiles until 10 enemies are killed by it. After you level it up, it will require less and less enemies killed, but still, I think it's a good spell. Just because I like how it looks. I like when a lot of stuff is falling from the sky, so why the hell not? Overall, not the highest priority. Yeah. Next one is Shard Bolter. This is a pretty nice spell, I like it. That's kind of throwing the stuff up at the enemy's face. And the good thing about it, that you really need to get freeze on it, like slowing effect. You really don't want to get status affinity on it, because it will just increase damage per status effect on the enemy of this spell. And since it's targeting the enemy front line, it will slow them down and they won't approach you that fast. So this is a spell that will hold the enemies off and won't allow them to come to you that fast. So yeah, freeze effect here instead of status affinity for sure. Slayer, when this spell kills an enemy, the shards will pierce through and continue traveling. Max 1 times. The question is, the damage of this spell isn't really high, so the chances that it will kill someone is really low, so I'm using this spell mostly as something that will slow the enemy down, so I wouldn't invest that much into it. Maybe 1 point in order to clear the early waves faster. So when you do the reset, when you do this enchant, you will fight the enemies of the lowest level and they will be one-shotted, only in that case. Elemental Overload, when this spell casts after the spell of a different school, 20% chance for +2 projectiles next cast, maybe few perks into it, not that much priority as well. So the main idea of this spell is slowing the enemies down in my scenario and freezing them so they won't come to you that early and your character can run away from them. As simple as that. Now, Winter's Coil. I like this spell a lot. It's a good spell, it's a nice spell. Elemental Purity here, 35% more spikes. It's really good. It's really good. But the problem is that then this spell won't slow down the enemy. So why the hell not? It's a good ability that will allow you to have more spikes, more damage. So yeah, why the hell not? Too many why the hell not for the same day. So yeah, it's a good spell. It will allow you to have more spikes, more damage, more freezing maybe. So yeah. Chill Reabsorption. For each spike that does not hit an enemy, 2% increase damage next cast. This one is interesting as well. It will increase in level as you will level it up as well. But since we're talking about Era 1, I wouldn't say that it's really important because the damage input won't be that high. Like, the perk invested in this skill won't give you that much damage increase as it will be if you put it in the different skill, but the idea of this spell is really good and it will stack up over time, so that's really nice. Frozen Mirror, after this spell kills 50 enemies, the next cast creates a second mirrored spiral. This is really fun, I like how it looks, it will kind of cover more area, it will be more dense, and it doesn't have that many levels, and 50 enemies isn't that much, so I would go for it, because this one will do quite a lot of damage. So yeah, that's the spells we will use in the Era 1. So guys, I hope that made some sense, guys, because the editing was a havoc for me and we had some technical issues as well, but I did my best and I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to go to the comments and like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. We need to hit 1000 subs as soon as possible. It's up to you to help me to do that. Also, check the video description and the pinned comment for additional links. We have the website with the articles on this game, I have some over there. We have the Discord where we can discuss everything, and we have the playlist with more guides on this game as well. Yeah, there are also social medias, you might want to check those out as well. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Совет out. До свидания, comrades. Сука, блять, микрофон триггерит нахуй.